And we are live, and I am frantically reading the last few pages of this book.
Oh, yeah, you're so close. Oh, man. So we have to spoil the ending for you, you know.
I mean, provided I don't reach it, yes. What I'm
Are you really that fast
realizing,
at reading? You could.
I'm not that fast, but what I'm doing is I'm skimming a lot of the prose, which is
Oh, okay.
something that normally I would abhor, but I really, really, really want to finish this before we start.
Yeah, you can do it. Should we hum some reading music for our audience?
I mean, we could speak to the audience if the audience
I
is
don't actually
speaking.
know. Yeah.
I don't see anything yet. I should say that we have the private chat should we need to say anything to each other. I
Oh,
saw the
okay.
notification just pop up on my phone, and then two people very quickly joined us.
Hello, people.
Marian, if you would be so kind as to drop the fact that we are live and post that in the book club chat, I will
Absolutely.
continue skimming this prose at rapid pace.
Okie doke.
Hello, two people.
I feel like Breck is one of them, just, psychically. I haven't gotten on Twitch yet, so I can't. I'm not cheating. Ah, no, I was wrong. Okay. How am I on background noise, by the way? Like, can you hear people talking?
Very occasionally, I hear the whine of a laptop fan, and that's it. So
Okay,
that's
that's not too bad.
that's hardly a thing, hardly a thing at all.
My laptop fan does get loud.
I didn't realize I was muted.
Oh no, yeah, I think you muted when you got up. So if you've said anything very recently, then I've been unable to hear it. I'm sorry.
You've missed some real gems, you know. Hmm.
Oh, I was right about Breck. It wasn't showing up in the room chat when I double checked myself either, so I'm rather proud about my psychic powers right now.
Nice. Trying to think up some good book suggestions for
Oh
next
no, I
time.
didn't think of any. I forgot that was the thing we were supposed to bring. Oh,
Well, we can come up with book suggestions after the fact if need be,
okay.
um, and kind of hash those out, and then create the poll as we usually would.
Did we ever
We were
do the second book for book club from Six of Crows? I know that a lot of us read it, but I don't know if we ever actually did it
crooked
in book club.
Crooked
Yeah,
Kingdom. I think
yeah.
we've been avoiding sequels in book club just in case new people join us.
Oh, okay.
Um, it's a daunting task to ask that they might. Uh,
Yeah, that's fair.
Oh, I think I know what this. Oh my god!
But everybody in the world is going to want to read Six of Crows pretty soon. So, well, not everybody in the world, but all the cool people.
Mm-hmm.
Have you watched Shadow and Bone, Lauren?
I haven't. I've been meaning to. I just I have a hard time making time to sit down and watch TV.
Yeah,
But
it's very good.
yeah,
I didn't realize until after I finished the series that I had actually read Shadow and Bone years ago, because I was like, oh, I guess I'll go read it now. And then I went to my Goodreads and I'd given it like 3 stars. And when I read the review, I was like, oh, okay, I can see that. But I think they did a better job of that particular thing that bugged me in the series without spoiling things. But yeah, I think they did a really good job because they also merged some Six of Crows stuff, but not from the actual Six of Crows plot, but they introduced the characters. So it's kind of cool to see a few of them.
yeah,
and they were
that's
so well
cool.
cast. I'm just like smiling thinking of Jesper. I'm so excited for when they do Six of Crows.
It'll be so fun. Yeah, I definitely want to watch it.
They really are the best part of the first season to me too. I mean, the Shadow and Bone heroine, she's okay. You know, it's like it is very much more young adult feeling in that book. Like when I read Six of Crows, I was like, I don't see it being a young adult book that much. But okay, I can see it kind of. Shadow and Bone very much more was, which is why I didn't connect them in my head when I started reading the Six of Crows one, even though they were both Grishaverse.
Yeah, I struggle with like young adult stuff. Like there's so much of it out there and I know a lot of it's good, but like that like young adult like tone and vibe, I really like. And I keep trying to force myself to like it.
Right.
Everyone's reading this book. I want to be in on the cool thing. And like it's got so many good reviews, then I read it and I'm like, I didn't like this that much. It's like it's not a bad book, it's just not for me.
Yeah.
But, Six of Crows it wasn't like too YA, I'm gonna save the world. Like,
right.
Yeah.
Where Shadow and Bone definitely kind of has that I'm gonna save the world sort of thing. I mean, it doesn't, but it does. You know, she's kind of more of a stereotypical heroine as far as like underdog that nobody expects to be this huge, impressive, magical person who can do so many things. And then she does, and then that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like Six of Crows was much more interesting in that it had flawed heroes, but they were very enjoyable, and you still wanted the best for them. That was really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. How close are you, Josh?
Page 187.
Oh.
Hello, tree.
You only have like 10 more pages.
I know. I'm trying to just like skim and catch bits.
Yeah, I think the acknowledgments start not long after where you are.
I recently read like a little article about how important pre-ordering is to like authors and book publishers. And so I pre-ordered like 4 or 5 books that I'm like, I know I want to read, but they've been on my like, you know, you click want to read on Goodreads, whatever.
Right.
And, it's killing me having to wait for them. Like, I already bought them. Why aren't they in my hand? But,
so the pre-ordering for a book that's already out is also important?
No, it's not out yet.
Oh, before they come out. Oh, okay. Yeah.
I don't know. It's supposed to...
it boosts them in the day of release that they go onto like bestseller lists more easily. Yeah.
And also so they get like big enough initial printings and publishers can be like, there's a set audience for this author, this like genre, that kind of thing. So.
Well, good for you. That is a very active, supportive reader thing to do. Good job.
There's some good fantasy ones coming out in the next like month or 2 that I'm hoping to read and then maybe suggest for book club.
Okay.
So, you know, with a lot of sci-fi and fantasy. I feel like they're so long that it's a little prohibitive.
Yeah, it's true. It can be hard.
Mm.
But that's why we did this, right? To make ourselves read fantasy.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be like, well, but that was long. We should read long books too. Although, there was one that was very long. No, it was just hard to read. I'm not sure it was actually would have 400 pages. That's hard to read is much different from like 500 pages. That's easy to read.
Yeah, I feel like a long, like adventure novel is easier than like a short like literature thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Try and not recommend anything much past 400 pages, but.
And I think it'd be okay to read things or recommend things that you haven't read yet too, right?
Yeah.
Like just because you were interested in reading it, and maybe other people would be too.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I'm doing a read through of all of the Hugo nominees for this year.
Oh, okay.
For best novel. And so I might recommend like one or two of those.
Invention is Hugo. Is that World Con or World Fantasy? I think that's World Con, right?
I think so. I'm not sure.
I think so.
But
yeah, World Science Fiction Convention. That's right, World Con. Yeah.
This Is How You Lose the Time War won last year for
cool.
best novella.
I can see it. It really deserves it.
Yeah.
Not that I read the other ones, but it just hits a certain way.
Yeah, it definitely like stayed with me. Like there were bits and pieces, like quotes that I was just like, a couple days later, I would be like, yeah, a London's dream of. Like, it just like, there are turns of phrase that just like really stick with you and you like think about it later. And I think that like if a book can make you do that, that's like one of the
yes.
Oh my God. So I just finished. I have never read anything so quickly as I just read the last like 30 or 40 pages of this book. Never before in my life. So starting things out, hello everyone and welcome to book club. I loved this month's book so much. Oh my God, it's so good. I made the tragic mistake, as we sometimes do, of not making enough time for reading. And so that's why I started the stream and still had like 15 or 20 pages to go. Thank you all for bearing with us as I dug into that. And thank you, Lauren and Marian, for keeping the conversation going. As
I love that you're able to speak coherently after finishing that book, because I'm pretty sure that I just sat there for about 6 minutes, just like staring at the wall.
Soaking it in, yeah.
So
I'm going to say something. I'm not trying to be egotistical here, but right before like setting everything up, I was reading the section where Blue has laid the groundwork for her final and ultimate plan, and how the garden is like, yes, of course, this is everything we wanted. This is all wonderful and beautiful. And she's like, and I'm sitting here and I've been fostering this life within this pot, and I go to watch a play and she's gone to see Romeo and Juliet. And I was like, I see you, Blue. I see what you're doing. I see the threads you are weaving, hoping that Red is watching your every move, that she might also understand what you're doing. Holy crap. Yeah, okay. So I don't want to get like right to the end of the book.
Right.
Well, that's where I just was. We should probably start a little bit earlier. So, themes of the book. What did you all pick up on?
Probably the biggest thing for me is how different I felt about the characters at the beginning and how they were embodied, I guess, rather than these kind of people that you got to know later. At the beginning, they're just very, I don't know. I was just like, I don't think I'm going to be able to have a connection with them at all. Like, one just seems really brutal and mechanical, and I don't know. And the sort of quotes even that I highlighted there are so different from what I highlighted later. Like, one spared life might be worth more to the other side than all the blood that stained Red's hands today. A fugitive becomes a queen or a scientist, or worse, a poet, which is a great line, but also like there's just so much fatalism at the start. And that's kind of what struck me at the beginning. And then, 7 chapters in, that's where it's like, oh, wow, no, it doesn't matter what they are physically anymore, because you start to connect to them as these beings that are just full of so much emotion, and they start to see the world and the universe in just a different way because of how they're relating to each other.
Yeah. I had on my list of like thoughts, talking points. How did you envision the characters? Because sort of like you were getting they're not like physically described really, and which is really rare for a main character.
Right.
And
kind of get hints.
Yeah. It's more of like a vibe for me than
Mm-hmm.
any particular like they look like this, which I feel like lends itself to the time travel-y, poetic, shape-shifting thing. Because if the authors had chosen to describe them in a certain way, it would have stuck in my head as that way, and they would have been less able to change.
Right.
I really appreciated that they picked something so simple and evocative as color for the names of our 2 main characters, because it's this situation where, because they're time traveling and because both of them as agents of time travel become whatever they need to be. Lost Limey was just saying there's a definite malleability to how the protagonists are undescribed.
Undescribed, I like that.
I know, right? That's such a good way to put it. There's this sort of, they talk in scenes about, claws or fangs or unfolding an arsenal from their back. And like, it's amazing and very cool, but it also means that you can't really describe them as any one individual person or figure or hair color or anything like that. And I noticed that later in the book, they do a little bit more of that, where it's like this time with stark black hair coming down in curls to her shoulder blades. Like, all of a sudden, like, they're giving you more evocative character imagery, because they're like, now that this is just a form that's being inhabited at this time.
Where if they'd started with that, it would have probably landed in our brains in a certain way, where we're like, oh, she's really this person, and she just changes forms. But we know that's not the true essence of the physicality.
You'd have a canonical image of them because that's what you were established with.
Right.
Yeah. I really enjoyed how sometimes the terms they would use to describe themselves would be very organic and sometimes very mechanical, and how you couldn't really tell, like, what were they modified to get there? Is this a to be taught a fortunate situation where they're doing gene mods every time they go out for a new mission? Is that just part of them? And then as the book proceeds, like, you learn about, we have mechanisms in our body that keep us from feeling hunger, that keep us from feeling pain, that keep, like...
And And am I correct that red tended to be the more mechanical and the
Mhm.
blue was the more organic? Yeah.
I mean, the garden versus the agency.
Yeah.
Like you could see God, they did such a good job of picking words that'd be so easy for us to evoke imagery. Like, ah,
And what I said in the book club chat a few weeks ago is something that really stuck with me about this book too, about just how who they were and how they felt about each other transcended all of that. It was just this love that was beyond anything that mattered physically or in time. And that sounds so cliched, but it doesn't feel that way when you're reading it. It feels so real and perfect. I loved it.
Yeah,
I skipped ahead from the beginning. But that was around chapter 7 where I made a note that was like, this is starting to feel like a Victorian romance.
Yeah, I really think like one of the themes that I really loved was like, I mean, it feels obvious, like the theme of time travel, but because they're actually time traveling, but the description of letters as time travel, of falling in love, and then in reverse viewing all of the previous interactions like through that lens. It like, and I think even books are mentioned as a type of like freezing in time, and like
yes,
it definitely like the letters and like the time it takes the letters to get there, like all of that is time travel. And I think that's just a really cool thought, and I could definitely like see the theme echoed throughout. So good.
So good.
Made me want to write a letter.
I will
Seal it with
say
wax.
all of the like poetry and prose in the book, it just like, I don't know, I don't know if this is true of everybody else, but it definitely made me feel like I could go out and be a poet like immediately. Like I've read the book, I'm now ready for poetry time. Let's go.
Yes. There's a few comments in chat too.
Yeah, like Brackett's talking about for the agency, I think the various bad possible fates that were alluded to for Red were usually along the variant of being taken apart. Lost Slimy says the agency to me has more of an undertone of malice and provocation than the garden, so I took Red's faction as the aggressor initially. And then Tree says a little evocative of good omens and the relationship between Azrael and Crowley overcoming the threads of their sides. Yeah, I think so my read was that it's to put it in D&D terms, it's barbarians and wizards. I don't know necessarily that one of them that seems like a chicken and the egg situation to think of like, oh well, who started all this?
Right.
Where I think if you look at it as they're two opposing forces that just have really, really drastically different strategies. When Blue would talk about like what kind of work she was doing and how she was shaping things and growing things and building things, and Red would talk about things like, for instance, the one saved captive could be as valuable to them as all of the tens of thousands of people she just killed. That to me indicates that the agency has a much more like, we're going to throw bombs at it and we're going to explode it and we're going to cut throats in the night and then we're going to get our hands soaked in blood and that's how we're going to win this thing. Meanwhile, the garden is like, we're going to sow the seeds of their ultimate downfall and we're just going to build it up very slowly and it's all going to like this. It was what was the line? Oh, Blue was talking about building a game of chess where every piece was a game of Go and playing that on a 4D scale. And it was just like, but also it that's precisely how Garden would do things, where the agency is clearly a lot more of a like hammer, nail, like.
I have another quote kind of along those lines. I have been flooding the void between stars, tangling their breath into networks of song. It's like those amazing pieces of imagery.
I don't know. I'm wondering if one of them wrote for Red and one of them wrote for Blue, since it's a
I
co-authored
suspect
book.
a lot of that happened just for the way that she mentioned, or one of them mentioned in the acknowledgments, that they were doing a lot of back and forth. And I do feel like they have a very specific voice for each one. So if they were each writing different characters, that would make a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I loved this one so much that I was like, oh, we gotta find out what else these two people have written. And I read a couple of books by Max Gladstone, and that kind of like poetic imagery is definitely in some of his other stuff.
Oh, okay. Nice.
But I think this is like the best of it, though, for sure.
That's awesome.
Chat is running counter to me a little bit. We've got Tree saying, I would have gone with a druid and a warforged. And Lost Limey saying, artificers and druids to my mind's eye. The reason I went with barbarians and wizards is because I think of the agency very much as the like brute force. We're going to rip it apart. And then, yes, we'll understand the individual components as they lay in tatters on the floor. But the important piece here is the ripping. Where the garden to me seems much more like refined and elegant and planned, but also with that like insidiousness, almost like poison at the center of it. Maybe rogues and barbarians would have been a better choice. I don't know. All I know is, the poetic imagery is just so killer in this book. Just like some of the ways in which they would describe each other or what would cause them to think of the other were just like,
So
and speaking of things like hunger and want and like, there's something very adolescent romance about the way they describe, like, it takes you back to early, like when you're first learning how to love and sort of like the power of the emotion that you have and the like freeness of giving yourself to that emotion. But with the lexicon of someone who is like an English doctorate, like there was a couple of times I consider myself reasonably well studied when it comes to words, and there were a couple of times where I was like, wait, what? Hold on a minute, let me look this one up. Just because it was like they would get so deep into prose, and it was always Blue. It was always Blue, because Blue was always the one that was like, well, I love books, and here are some of my favorites.
Oh, darn. I have no idea which quotes of mine are Blue versus Red, but they probably are mostly Blue. I have so many quotes here that I am like, so many.
I really liked the like, I don't know, like slightly grotesque and like violent imagery that they use, especially in the beginning, to describe the way they feel about each other. Gosh.
I have one, I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Her pen had a heart inside, and the nib was a wound in a vein. She stained the page with herself. She sometimes forgets what she wrote, save that it was true and the writing hurt.
Yeah,
is that kind of
yes, that's exactly the quote I was thinking of.
Oh, yay!
Like that feeling of like vulnerability, I think, is like, and like this letter is a knife at my throat. Like,
yes,
kind of like vulnerability of putting yourself out there to someone, I just thought was really well expressed.
Yes,
100%.
Especially in a letter where you can't. Oh gosh, I think it was Red who says something about I prefer read receipts, and
yes.
oh
my
yeah,
God.
no, so good.
So good.
there's very much like the agency does have a sort of very technological mindset about things, as Red describes like processes and preferences, and even in the way that the two of them look at their relationship, it starts out in a very like Red seeing things from a more mechanical, like there's a certain like hunger that I have for this and that sort of thing, and the Blue is speaking of things more in philosophical or natural terms. Like, I don't know. God, there's so much to
Wasn't
explore
the
in such a
hunger
short period.
blue?
Oh, you know what? Blue was
Because that was
hunger.
what
You're
was
right.
fed into Blue from at the end
Mm-hmm.
because of what
Yeah.
Red did.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you hunger? Do you dream? That's good.
Yeah. Oh my God.
I'm just going to sit here and read quotes all night.
Do you have a favorite? Oh, go ahead.
The one
Yeah.
I was going to highlight real quick, I highlighted earlier in chat, was adventure works in any strand. It calls to those who care more for living than for their lives.
I highlighted that too. I love
I'm
it.
pretty sure that was also a Blue quote. Blue just has a way with words. What can I say?
Yeah, this one that I was going to say is my favorite, and I shared this in book club chat too, and is another Blue one. I write to you in stings, Red, but this is me, the truth of me, as I do so, broken open by the act in the palm of your hand, dying. I just love that. It's perfect. I think that's my favorite.
There is a certain amount of that scene in particular, because Blue has already had her epiphany about where everything's going and the development thereof and the ultimate conclusion and how she and Red both get out of this. That line to me feels like she's already trying to tip Red off, because she sends that as Red is sending the don't read my next letter. That is the very next thing she sends, and then before Red can send her reply, did Blue write in the dust motes "as you wish"? Is that what she wrote in the white room as they're composing the lethal letter?
Was it written in dust? I don't remember.
I think it was written in dust, but I'm in the blooming dust. She reads a letter. She walks away. Later, a shadow moves among the ashes, eating. Dear Red, as you wish, B.
Okay, yeah.
In of itself, given all of the literary and film and all of that references, I have to assume is a Princess Bride reference.
Yeah. I mean, of course. I'll get behind that.
Yeah.
More only mostly dead.
As the prophets say.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's something we haven't discussed on stream yet. We were talking about this a little bit before we started streaming, but the concept of the prophets, as the prophets would say, being musicians, particularly from around our era. I love it. I just love it so much. I also enjoyed that
I like how in the book club discussion guidelines, it says, do you think that they are considered prophets in their own time? I'm like, no.
No.
I don't think so. Unless you have very different definitions of prophet.
Well, it depends on if you spell it with an F or a
That does
PH,
remind me of
right?
a Rush song, though. The words of the prophets were written on the studio walls in Limelight, instead of subway walls. Or was it subway walls? Because they
I was
were
thinking of I was thinking of Subway Walls, but that was
But that's in Simon and
not
Garfunkel.
Rush. Yes.
Yeah, the Rush song is Limelight, and they changed the Simon and Garfunkel lyrics to be Studio Walls because it's about the rock.
I always took it as like a tongue-in-cheek, like a joke, not as like literally in the future.
Right.
But
Oh, you mean in the book or in the song?
in the book. I'm
Okay.
sorry, in the book.
You didn't think that they really thought they were prophets in the book? They were joking?
Yeah, I thought I interpreted it as like a little, like a tongue-in-cheek kind of a joke, but
Oh, okay. I could see that.
Well, aren't the, like, as the prophets said, aren't those all exclusively in Red's letters?
that's a good question. I don't know.
I went a little too fast to have that level of recollection, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I like it. I like this theory.
Something I was going to say was that, did you notice that the red side, the agency, their controlling force is the Oracle of Chaos? How cool is that? And Blue even at one point is like, this to remove one of our agents as embedded deeply as this would cause such chaos as even your Oracle would not want, because it's too wild and too unpredictable. And it's like, God, that's so cool.
It's very cool. So that part, like, it kind of stood out to me because I was like, everything sort of else about the agency seems like fairly mechanical and like a little bit more rigid than Garden, and then they're driven by this like chaos-ish Oracle of Chaos. I thought that was an interesting contrast. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you do think of nature typically as being a little more chaotic than technology. But maybe,
of course, a garden is a lot more tended, so maybe.
Well, and if you think of like a biome's not really chaos. It may be perceived as chaos if you don't really understand it, but there's an order and a hierarchy and a cycle to all things in a biome. I don't know. I think it's a clear indicator of how good this book is that we've been talking basically nonstop, and we keep coming up with things that we don't have answers for. Somehow, in the span of just under 200 pages. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite, like, little vignette or place that they met? I mean, I already kind of talked about mine, but I definitely loved the way they talked about London. I mean, the Atlantis bit was funny. I liked that one too, but they referenced London all throughout it. And I don't know, like, I love steampunk trash, like, love it. So the quote, London next, the same day, month, year, but one strand over, is the kind of London other London's dream. Sepia tinted, skies strung with dirigibles, the viciousness of empire acknowledged only as a rosy backdrop glow, redolent of spice and petaled sugar, mannered as a novel, filthy only where story requires it, all meat pies and monarchy. This is a place Blue loves and hates herself for loving. And like, I very much am there. Like, I love all that steampunk stuff. It's like a little done. It's a little cringe, but like, you love it anyway. I don't know. It like really spoke to me.
I don't know if I have anything that would top that. I love it. That's one of the most evocative of scenes. I did like the tea shop sequence. That felt like maybe because it got into my sequential mind a little bit more than a lot of other scenes did, as far as like there's action that takes place in one place and then moves to another part of that same building. That felt very satisfying in the midst of all of this. And she's just drinking tea, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. That was probably one of the ones that would jump out at me. But I think the London description there, ones that others dream of, is perfection. Yeah.
I think my favorite for just like evocation of feeling was when Red has the last, she thinks, of Blue's letters, and just like goes ripping through time looking for a place to really contain her grief. And she describes that she says she's looking for a cave, something with a gaping open mouth in which she can be swallowed whole. And I'm just like, God, I know exactly the kind of structure you're talking about, and understand and appreciate the feeling therein so well. Like,
yeah. I think this is from that same area. Is it toward the end? She is fast and fierce, and unlike her pursuer, she does not care if she never finds her way home again. She slides from thread to thread. Cities bloom and decay around her. Stars die. Continents drift. Everything starts and everything fails. I love that passage too.
yeah,
And I don't remember
that
the
is-
context of my second to last highlight, but
that
power of she enters as a letter, comma, sealed in blue. That hit me.
that's her breaking into the garden.
Yeah.
She enters as a letter sealed in blue.
Sealed in blue. Right, because
Just
that's
like-
what she's taken on through all of this. But I couldn't remember if it was directly after that last. No, it's like a whole 20 pages after that.
Oh no, it's
Yeah.
pages and pages later.
Yeah.
Having blitzed through that, just oh my God.
I love that as like, I don't know, like a metaphor for how like loving someone changes you.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well,
I
and
know. How
also-
did this book make me all romantic? I was not prepared. I was prepared to stay in my cynical science fiction world with like time war battles and stuff. And then it was like, wait, but you believe in true love, right? Yes, you do.
Oh,
Okay.
I really enjoyed the symbolism of Red convinced that she has lost Blue, is kind of just like wandering through time kind of aimlessly, and then sees something that Blue has left as a sort of like wake up call for
Yeah,
her.
the mural.
The mural on the subway wall.
Yeah, she's like aimlessly wandering the like London Underground, like the tube. And like I don't know if you've ever had some heartbreak, but some lonely public transit rides, you're staring out the
Yes.
window, like what a vibe.
It is. Yes.
And
I
then-
went to Rome not long after one of those heartbreaks, and it's perfect just being on a dirty subway and seeing it just flash by. It's perfect. Yeah. How's chat
But then-
doing?
Chat is doing well. Let's see. Tree says, how universal are these two characters that we could put them in so many classes, lol. Lost
Yes.
Limey says, linguistically, it was so good, especially for a novella that doesn't really contain any dialogue / speech for 80% of it.
Yeah.
Tree also really appreciated the tea house.
Yay.
And Breckett says, I was captivated enough by this book that I went through most of it in one sitting. And
Nice.
I made the tragic mistake of reading it piecemeal, like here and there, like mostly before bed, as I usually do, and then not managing to get to the hook point where the plant is being developed and grown, which I think at that point I wouldn't have been able to put it down. I would have just been like, no, everything else has to wait. I have important reading
Yeah.
to do right now.
I definitely spent more time in my reading that morning. I was just like, no, I'm finishing this sucker now. I'm not waiting till tomorrow's reading time. It's happening.
Hello, work. I'm going to be late.
Benefits of being self-employed.
Making your own hours definitely has its ups and downs.
Yeah, the down is also that I just don't want to work a lot, and I don't need to a lot right now. So it's just like, you know what? I'll just watch the BTS teaser again. That's important. It's a priority.
Look, your joy is absolutely important and a priority.
But yes, the reading, I'm really glad that I got back into book club for this book because it was invigorating. It made me remember how much I love reading.
Ooh, invigorating. That's such a great word.
Lost Lady says, I read it in paired chapters, 1 red, 1 blue, until about 60% done, and then I powered through until like 2 in the morning.
Yeah, I definitely think that last like quarter, impossible to put down.
Yeah, definitely.
Once that red berried shrub really like has its thorns in you, you know.
Very, very nice.
So something I was thinking about kind of as I was like rapidly flipping through. There's something about the concept of having something and then losing that thing that you have, and then going back and really digesting everything that you got out of that initially, and that being part of what like blossoms you into a whole other person. Because with like the experience of where you were at the time and the growth of what became sense, like I don't know, that feels really metaphorical to
Definitely.
me.
Yeah, I agree.
And there's
How
almost
people can affect you just by your interactions.
Yeah. Well, and Red going back and collecting all of the scraps.
Yeah.
It's the
like therapy
consumption for me, like the eating of it, like the taking it into yourself and consuming it. I think like there's all sorts of imagery around like eating, like they do a lot of eating of letters, of berries, of like all sorts of different things. And yeah, definitely like the like metaphorical and literal consumption of that I found like really evocative.
Yes.
Well, and particularly the Seeker. I think the point that I figured out that the Seeker was Red was the point where in the book Red manages to catch and fight the Seeker, because the first few attacks they match each other blow for blow. And I was just thinking about that, like that scene in movies where it's like, I know all your moves. Like,
yeah, it definitely felt that way. And I also, by that point, felt like it had been pretty well established that it wasn't somebody from her side, because they hadn't found her out yet and what she was really doing, when it would have been really obvious if they had seen all of that. And Blue didn't seem to think, like I didn't think she was lying about it or knowing about it. So it was like, well, like it seemed like pretty obvious. I don't know, that sounds like the wrong word, but it seemed pretty clear that it would probably be Red. But it took me a while to figure out I don't think I really did until the real end, but I did kind of think it had something to do with going back and changing how things went. But I didn't really see it turning out the way it did, and I was really excited about how that worked. I don't know what I thought. I don't think I really tried too hard to figure it out. I was just like, that's interesting. I wonder how that's going to go.
Yeah. Sometimes you just take it in.
Yeah. It's one of those books that really felt like I'm just going to enjoy this experience. And even though it demands a lot of thinking, it didn't make me feel like I had to try to see what's happening behind it, which is fun. Like I'm so used to seeing a formula in a story that it's always delightful when I think there's one thing that's going to happen and it doesn't. Like in Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. Like those are some really fun plot twists. But the pacing is still sort of predictable. And in this book, I felt like I didn't really know what was happening, but it was still really enjoyable. And it didn't feel like it had a plot until I got to the climax. And I was like, oh, this actually has a plot with like a real climax. And I totally hadn't been picking up the plot beats until then. So that was really kind of fun too. Not to analyze, I guess is what I'm trying to say, because I'm so used to just kind of analyzing as I read as a former English major.
Mm.
How will I write about this on a paper? 5-paragraph structure.
I think there's value to reading anything in a kind of like analytical mindset. And for me, especially this being a time travel story, I was like, what kind of mysteries are we sewing here? And initially I had thought that the Seeker would be like a third party, someone who is planning to bring down both sides.
Yeah, at the very beginning.
Of speaking, I was kind of right.
You're right. That is indeed how you lose the time war. Yes.
Sort of kind of in the right, but initially I was like, who could this mysterious Seeker figure be? Ooh, it's very Lost Slimy asks, for such little description, do you find it odd that the authors assigned gender to Red and Blue?
That kind of crossed my mind earlier too when I said she. I was like, wait, were they she? Yeah, no, they did say she a few times, right? I think so.
They exclusively used she, her, not only for Red and Blue, but also when Red wanted to curse gods. It's written, she wished that there was a god that she could curse her capital H name.
Which would make you go, oh, is it all female in this story? But I remember there was definitely at least one male specifically in the torture scene. Because I actually thought that might be Blue at one point because he had lapis eyes and was groaning. And I was like, oh no, what's happening? But it was just Red noticing something blue in the scene as she does. But yeah, that was interesting. Like, there's so much uncertainty, but they kept a lot of certainty around the gender.
Yeah, I don't know.
Go ahead.
It reminded me of a little bit of like the approach to gender reminded me of the Ancillary Justice series and Steven Universe, which is two very different things with tone. Both have sort of non-gendered aliens that are also go by she, her, and are sort of female, but only one gender. And that's a little bit the vibe I got here.
Okay.
I don't know.
I haven't watched either of those enough to have any thought about it. But cool.
The Ancillary Justice series is a very, very good sci-fi book.
Okay.
Hint, hint. Maybe I'll suggest it someday.
I was going to say, haven't you suggested one of the Ancillary Justice books?
I think I
have. At
least
once.
Keep pushing it on us. We'll come around.
So regarding the choice of she, her for not only Red and Blue, but all of their agents and all of their, because I don't think there were any male agents described.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely male figures because they talk about Caesar and Socrates and
no, I think it was
Genghis
one
Khan.
of the members of hold on, let me see.
There might have been.
I thought the guy being tortured was just a civilian.
Oh, he was just from that scene. Well, not scene, but from that time. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There may
Not
have
their
been,
army, but the army that they were pretending to be in. Okay.
There may have been a male identified agent alongside Red at the stabbing of Caesar.
Oh.
During that scene. I can't recall if she genders the other agent she's speaking with. So I'm not certain on that one. It was kind of interesting, though, that scene, because she's talking about how it's so rare for them to get an opportunity to really cut loose like this, and so she didn't want to seem reluctant lest she draw suspicion to herself, which is like indicative of her kind of softening a little bit to the ways of like bloodshed and war because of her interactions with Blue, which is just like, it's so effective.
Mhm.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
at the beginning, she's like, yeah, I'm going to take down. Hold on. There's another quote that I haven't shared that I wanted to. It's really close to the beginning. It's so easy to crush a planet that you may overlook the value of a whisper to a snowbank. Which is poetic, but it's also just like, there's just so much more destructive language early in the story compared to
Yeah.
what she's like later. Because of Blue. I mean, I don't want to paint the garden as being this utopia either, because obviously it gets pretty violent when it needs to. We see that at the end too.
Yeah, pruning, you know,
The moth wings shredding. Yeah,
you'll
and slicing.
be ripped apart and decomposed and used to feed, you know, the rest.
Yeah.
Like it can be pretty brutal as well.
Right.
They do plenty of killing themselves.
Yeah.
The barbs that exist there only grow denser the more you push until you are shredded to tinsel among them.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
As I think more of the gender and like why they chose to have Red and Blue be like women through all of the stories, even when I think it's Red is like a man or whatever in one of her lives, like working for the Mongols or something. I don't know, like the references to Victorian London and the like sort of language of this like close, intimate friendship is like very evocative of like all of the intimate friendship letters.
Right.
Are like really famous for being like lesbian love stories, like Anne Lister, Virginia Woolf, like all of those like very beautiful, like longing letters that I associate with like queer women through history. So I think it like definitely ties to and like maybe calls back to some of that. And in a way that I don't think it would have worked as well if you just swapped genders or something. I don't think it would have had sort of some of that like connotation.
Right. And that does seem like one of the consistent themes of the story too. Like, it's not that they just talk about letters in 2 paragraphs.
Yeah.
Or London in the 2 paragraphs, but that feeling between them really goes through the whole story after a certain point. So yeah, you're probably right. It wouldn't feel the same to have a dude type being like,
yeah. I mean, there are
stamp your name in wax. I mean, yeah, I'm not saying that guys haven't been similarly affluent in letters in past. Alexander Hamilton and Lafayette, for example. Anyway, whole different tangent. But as far as that feeling of Victorian letters.
Yeah. I don't know, now I'm thinking all about letters. I always think of like when I think of like men writing letters, I think of like the letters from war, like back to their sweethearts back home, like all of the Civil War letters. My friends and I have a joke. It's always like, my dearest Virginia, the winter's grown long, and you just kind of fill in your own. And
right.
Be a good improv exercise.
Yes, very fun.
It's interesting. I think part of having both of them be she, her, and then the way they talk about men in the like, men end up being almost like background dressing because the two of them, I think a lot of it is because the two of them are so focused on each other, first as
Mhm.
rivals and then as like realizing slowly that like they're head over heels. um that ends up being a lot of like, I'm embedded here and my husband is going to be very important to the garden in the future, and so I'm helping guide his thoughts as we proceed through these things. But I think one of the lines we haven't talked about yet is when Blue is aware of a certain way of tying knots in reeds, and then another is interested in seeing what might lie across what their conquerors will eventually call the Pacific Ocean. And but what use would be traveling so far from their coastal fishing waters, and what use would be a vessel that could hold two families? But thankfully, geniuses know better than to consult young men. And like, and then climbing the temple steps to speak to the great grandfather and the priests therein, which not all of which are men themselves, and they can draw a line between 2 points. And I'm just like, I love this so much. This is so good.
Yeah, I think like that theme of like women influencing history. Like, I mean, they hang out with Socrates, Genghis Khan. Like, there's like a lot of
Right.
as well, but there's certainly seems like intentional emphasis on the ability of women to influence history, whether it be a wife to a husband or a woman learning this new technology with like not making or any a suggestion to whatever, a woman's car breaking down who then talks to her niece to do some. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And
I
that in
liked that.
turn,
I'm glad you brought up that island, the Pacific Island story. That one was good.
let's see. Lost Limey says, yeah, if you have male presenting characters in Victorian London in a time travel story, it seems to go to Jack the Ripper place, which isn't the vibe here. Tree says, this definitely passes the Bechdel test. And Lost Limey replies, doesn't the Bechdel test require dialogue? I mean, there's a lot of words exchanged between female characters, and almost none of them have to do with any men at all. So.
Yeah, that was about movies where you can't avoid dialogue. In books, it's okay. You can avoid dialogue.
You can avoid.
I think there's a dialogue going on in their letters.
Right,
so
but as far
too.
as like having a physical conversation, but I agree
The
that there's definitely a
spirit
dialogue.
is alive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something I'm curious about, because Amal Elmotar and Max Gladstone, I don't know how those individuals would identify themselves. When we're talking about like the characters identifying themselves as she, her the whole time. Okay, so Max identifies male, and Amal identifies female. So we have a she, her cast, but it's a she, him writing team. So I don't know. I think it's an intentional choice. I don't know that we need to feel weird about it.
I think there's another aspect to it that much as with so much in the story, it ends up transcending gender as well. Like even though it has that vibe of Victorian romance, like they just love each other because of like the essence of their beings.
Well, there's also like they identify themselves as she, her, but the physicality of their form is so loose in of itself, you know,
Right.
which I think is beautiful. Like they could be anything at any time as creatures walking planes,
Yeah.
but they are still themselves. and
Okay, I need to
rooted in
find where I
that.
took this quote from. I'm sorry,
Which-
I got
which quote is
distracted.
this?
I think this was about conversation, but it might have been about letters. It's on page 53. I assure you that cryptography pales in comparison. Imagine a cipher made up of interlocking moods, shifting in response to environmental stimuli. I think she was talking about gossip in letters. I can't remember the
Yeah.
context of it now.
She was talking about a specific court and a lady and their deception, I believe, of the Scots.
Oh, wow. That's a lot more than I remembered.
I mean, I
Yes, because it was, and then
Lady Hess? There's something
My
ESS.
memory's so bad. Oh my gosh.
Blue, I think it's Blue references that each person had their own unique way of spelling, and that makes it like frustrated forgers later on, because not only did you have to know somebody well enough to know sort of what they were hinting at, but you also had to know their own idiosyncratic spelling choices. And I thought that was very interesting, just as like a highlight to how complex.
Okay, I found the full quote.
Like,
how much glorious double talk took place while Mary, Queen of Scots, was under her roof. And then that quote. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah, I keep like, language is so complex. People are really, really complex, like the way we talk. Again, letters, language, prose.
I love it.
It's so good.
It's so good.
I've got one more quote.
Okay.
Bring it.
So I've already talked about there's a kind of time travel in letters, but I got another one about letters and time travel, which are books are letters in bottles cast into the waves of time from one person trying to save the world to another.
Oh, that was from the acknowledgments, wasn't it? I think that was from the very end, because I think I just read that in the acknowledgments this afternoon. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Aw. Because it was thanking the readers and saying that. I love it.
God, it's so good.
It's so good.
So I feel like we could just go on and on and on and on and on, but I do want to take a little bit of time to talk about next month's book, which I dropped the ball a little bit. I was supposed to remind Alex to see if she could order it.
She said she could.
I only did that today.
But she said in book club chat that she could.
Yay! Okay,
What?
So next month's book is The 10,000 Doors of January.
Ooh, exciting.
So, it was by like a landslide too. I mean, a landslide for book club, which is like three more votes than anything else. But so Alex can order it. So if you need a copy in your Richmond local or Richmond shipping distance, which I think is most of us, then go ahead and reach out to Alex. Let her know you'd like a copy. She'll put you on the reserve list, and then she'll do her pre-orders based on that. But Lauren, this previous book club list, I believe, was all you suggestions, which I was very excited about because the write-ups for them were so comprehensive and so excellent. I had a brief moment of concern I wasn't going to be able to fit them all on one Discord post, but I did. So it worked out great. But so if you'll tell us a little bit about 10,000 Doors of January, since I know it's been a little while since I posted those synopses, or I can pull up the synopsis and read what you wrote earlier.
Oh, I'm sure what I wrote is going to be much more eloquent, but I can also give an off-the-cuff summary.
I mean, what do you guys think? What would be more fun? I was talking to the two of you, not necessarily chat.
Oh,
okay.
I'm sorry. I might have been looking at Goodreads, but go ahead.
Yeah, I can just do an on-the-fly thing. So
Do it.
10,000 Doors of January is a young adult portal fantasy. So basically, January is a young woman coming of age, and she's the ward of this like rich dude. And as wards of rich dudes do, comes across some magic, some intrigue, and some doors to other worlds. If you liked some of the like poeticness of This Is How You Lose the Time War, there'll be some of that in 10,000 Doors of January, but mixed in with some more action, some more like concrete plot stuff. And it's really a lot about a love of stories and storytelling and like their power to move people. So
Oh, cool.
I'm very excited for this book.
it should be a pretty like fun, quick, like young adult read.
Yeah.
I like spoke a little bit about my challenge with young adult books, but I thought this was a good one.
I know, like, occasionally you pick up a young adult book and you're like, how many angsty teenagers do I really need to experience in my life? But yeah, I have found that the couple of times you've brought a young adult book to the table, not a whole lot of angst. Like there's a little bit of the classic, in specifically, I should say, Six of Crows, there's a little bit of the classic, like, just talk to each other.
Have conversations about your feelings, please.
Just
oh my God.
feel things and say words about the things you feel. But not so much as to be like, but enough to be like, teenagers, honestly.
Right.
So I'm hoping for more of that, like, level of, like, yes, these are young adults, but also
Yeah, this one is less bloody than Six of Crows, but yeah, it's good. Not too much angst.
I don't feel like that's a terribly high bar to have to cross under.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Kaz like kills a guy just for kind of insulting the girl he likes, which, yeah.
That's a thing. I think one of the first like pages is about how they tried to make it so that, oh Lord, Inez would just fall from any surface she tried to climb. And so she's just like envisioning herself as like splattering onto the bricks below. Like that's like one of the first pages is her being like, can you imagine me scaling up one of these and then trying to grab a loose ledge and just like becoming creamed corn all over the cobblestones? And it's like, whoa, all right, going to a dark place to start, I see.
Right.
Slimy asks, is it less gory than Gideon the Ninth?
Speaking of low bars.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, so 10,000 Doors of January. I'm super excited to get into it. Hopefully y'all are as well. I'll be letting Alex know that I need a copy ordered for me because I absolutely need a copy ordered for me. What else do we have before we jump into plugs? I know we usually do book nominations, but it sounded like at the start of the call, we didn't come prepared. I really didn't come prepared because I was literally finishing the book as I was sitting down.
I did not either, but I did just peek on Goodreads to see if any of my friends were reading anything that I might want to read. And there was one that sounded kind of interesting. But I feel like that would be irresponsible of me to be like, hey, I have a friend who is reading this right now. But listen, this actually, the Midnight Library, between life and death, there is a library, and within that library, the shelves go on forever. Every book provides a chance to try another life you could have lived, to see how things would be if you had made other choices. Would you have done anything different if you had a chance to undo your regrets? So yeah, that does sound like a great recipe for existential crisis, but also good for midlife crisis, which is totally my zone right now. So
I was gonna say, as you started talking about a library with shelves that go on forever, I was like, L space? We're talking about L space now? Like going back to guards? And,
I didn't finish that. Darn. I
Reaching
need to finish
into
that.
the alternate universes to retrieve books we might need at later times. Like,
I do have 2 suggestions,
oh
but
my
I
gosh.
can save them for another time.
No, please.
Okay. So I have more than 2, but I'll just start with 2 because they're both written by the same person, who's Rebecca Roanhorse. She's an author I really, really like, and they have sort of different vibes. So first we have Trail of Lightning, which I've recommended, I think maybe once or twice before, and it is like urban fantasy post-climate apocalypse.
Whoa.
So I'll just read the back, I guess. While most of the world has drowned beneath the sudden rising waters of the climate apocalypse, Dinata, formerly the Navajo reservation, has been reborn. The gods and heroes of legend walk the land, but so do monsters. Maggie Hosky is a Dinata monster hunter, a supernaturally gifted killer. When a small town needs help finding a missing girl, Maggie is their last best hope. So it's kind of got like some like supernatural monster of the week vibes.
Mm-hmm.
With it's chock full of like Native American legend and like badass action. It's very fun. Great world building. And then the next is, so we have urban fantasy, sort of urban fantasy, and then high fantasy with Rebecca Roanhorse's new book called Black Sun, which takes place in oh gosh, I'm gonna get it's inspired by South American indigenous culture, and I mean Rebecca Roanhorse is Native American, but it's really good. It's very like bloody. It's about what is it about? What's a good way to describe it? Sure, I'll read part of the cover. Meanwhile, a ship launches from a distant city bound for Tova and is set to arrive on the solstice. The captain of the ship, Shyla, is a disgraced teak whose song can calm the waters around her as easily as it can warp a man's mind. Her ship carries one passenger, described as harmless. The passenger, Serapio, a young man, blind, scarred, and cloaked in destiny. As Shyla well knows, when a man describes himself as harmless, he usually ends up being a villain. So
I really want to read this. That sounds really good.
Super interesting and unique, and again, chock full of indigenous myth. So
hell yeah.
These would be my 2 suggestions, though there are, I'm sure, many more from chat.
Not as of yet. Although
Eventually.
we can absolutely collect those over time. I need to come up with a recommendation myself.
I can type up something more coherent, like I did for the last ones for these 2.
That would be lovely, because usually what I do is I rely on the Goodreads synopsis to give everybody what info they might need. Which Goodreads typically does a pretty good job, but there are occasions where I'm like, I disagree with this on a couple of small points, like where I don't think the synopses you gave me for the 3 books from last month, I was like, holy smokes. Like these went significantly deeper with like, this is what you're getting. Here it is. This is the whole package.
I find normally when a book is described, they describe like the plot. Mm-hmm. When like often I think more important is like, what is the tone? Like to me, the tone and like themes of the book are just as important as like what is actually happening. Like, is it
absolutely
like, rival agents fall in love in a time war, but that doesn't really give you anything about the tone or the prose or the poetry or like anything like that. It could easily be like a shoot 'em up novel.
Right. It could be The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Like,
yeah. So I find that's the part that I really like reading in a review.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I'm trying to think what's on my bookshelf that I haven't read that I really want to read that I haven't suggested like 3 or 4 times already. I'm going to have to look. Actually, wait. If I take a second, there is a Terry Pratchett book that I would want to put, which, oh Lord, what is the name of it? I can post it later. I'm not going to worry about it right now because I can't. I was like, surely if I start typing, it'll come to my brain. But it's outside of all of his worlds. It is a book that is basically a collection of short stories and musings from him later in his years. And it's kind of a revisit to a lot of his older work, as well as some commentary on work he had done more recently. And it's been sitting on my shelf for a very long time. I'm very excited to crack it open at some point. It's probably, if we end up getting into it, going to be one of the bigger books we read on book club, because it is a significant tome, which is part of the reason it hasn't been opened by me yet, is because I've been like, I'm gonna need time for that one. But I'll put that up in chat. We'll have room for a couple more, and then how did everybody feel about this kind of like rotation where it was like we do a month with Lauren's suggestions and then we do a month with, everybody's suggestions. I liked it because I really liked Lauren. I was really excited about all 3 of the options you brought. I'm usually very excited about everything you bring to the table. And so having a situation where I was like, oh, I get to pick from one of these delectable newer pieces, because I don't get to read a lot of newer stuff. Because I don't make enough time for reading.
Yeah, I feel like with Lauren being our resident expert and having so many good suggestions, it's good to have a time where we just are definitely going to take one of her recommendations, because there have been a lot of times I'm like, oh, but I bet that would have been a good book to read. But another book it has more like name recognition or more popularity and more people have heard about it, just word of mouth or something before it. Yeah. But there's pretty much every time you recommended a book, I thought I need to add that to my list. So yeah.
There's a very real chance that I get to my bookshelf to try to identify the book I'm talking about, and I end up being like, oh wait, actually. So don't hold me to that Terry Pratchett quote.
Ooh, I had a thought, and inspired by my love-hate relationship with steampunk. It's really a love relationship. I think that would be a fun theme one month if we or I could come up with like 3 steampunk suggestions.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Because I just read a novel set. Oh, well, it's a novella, but I'm reading the sequel novel soon, set in a steampunk Cairo. So cool.
What?
It's called Master of Jinn, like Djinn, and it sounds pretty cool. I just read The Haunting
Nice.
Tram Car number 15.
Ooh. So the thing I was going to say on steampunk is I think steampunk is super appropriate for these book club streams because we are typically a sci-fi fantasy book club stream. And what's more sci-fi and fantasy than steampunk?
Exactly.
So yeah, of course we should do that. Absolutely.
Good idea.
Max Gladstone, one of the authors of this, has a whole steampunk series. And I've only read the first one because it has necromancer in it. And it's about two necromancers who get dispatched to this city to oversee, like the city's god just died. And they're there to investigate the death of this city's god. So cool.
Oh.
Oh.
It's called 3 Parts Dead. It's really weird.
I'm so intrigued by this, just conceptually, like, oh my gosh. Okay, yes, we absolutely need to do a steampunk month. I think based on the fact that you've already brought 2 amazing steampunk ideas to the table, and I can't think of any really amazing steampunk books to bring to the table right now, I think that might be next month and just be a, like, Lauren, bring us steampunk books.
I'll give it some thought.
I'd be totally down for that. If you end up being like, give me another couple of months and I'll come back with some steampunk books, that's fine. But
no, I can think of 5 already.
Hell yeah.
She's like, give me time to narrow it down. I'll be ready in a few weeks.
That's fair. That's fair. That's totally fair. Speaking of which, the next time we will be getting, oh Lord, I just typed cake de bar instead of calendar. So that's where I'm at right now.
Cake bar.
Oh, I would love a cake bar. For next month's book club stream, we will be doing it on the 29th, which should give us a little bit more time for reading this month's book. We could have done it on the 15th, but we were like, you know what? Like the later in the month date is typically a little bit better for us. Lost Slimy has dropped a suggestion into chat, slightly left of field. The Two Georges by Richard Dreyfuss and Harry Turtledove. It's an alternative history. I read it a long time ago, but I barely recall the plot. I'm wondering if it's the Two Georges. Is it like King George? Is it George Washington? What Georges are we talking about here?
I mean, those are the 2 Georges that would come to mind.
Those are the 2 Georges that come to my mind.
For the stolen painting depicts a treaty between George Washington and King George III. So yeah, it's about both of them.
Very interesting. Okay, yeah, I'll put that on the list.
A treaty that has kept America under British rule for 2 centuries, and the terrorists, who call themselves Sons of Liberty, want America to be free. So yeah, interesting alternative history.
That could be good. That could be good. Tree says, I remember almost nothing of Turtledove, but I do know I enjoyed. Right. Well, let's real quick, before we sign off for the evening, Marian, do you have anything you would like to plug tonight?
The book that I don't want people to read. Lately, I've been writing fan fiction. Also, don't want people to read. But yeah, my pen name is Sonia Bosetti. If you want to look me up on Amazon.
Heck yeah! And can you spell that for me? And I'll post it in chat.
SONIA BOSETTI.
Excellent.
My book is a lighthearted take on love and mortality.
Aww.
How do you deal with being in relationships when you know everybody's going to die? That's kind of where I was. That's where my headspace was when I wrote that.
I mean, that is a big, like, philosophical question that needs more exploration, I think. And you also write for Medium sometimes, don't you?
I have 2 articles on there. I haven't been very consistent about it, but I was looking at my account the other day. Does that count? I thought about writing something.
I mean, they do say it's the thought that counts. So I would assume that applies here as well.
Yeah, I'm not under my real name on Medium. So
Excellent. And
follow
Lauren,
Um, just if you want to know what I'm reading, you can follow me on Instagram at Feminist Reading List, where I read and review like sci-fi, fantasy, romance, manga, anything I feel like reading at the time. And I do read a lot of fan fiction, so mad props to all the fan fiction writers out there.
Thank you.
and what I am going to highlight for me is first and foremost, get on our Discord. That is bit.ly/Goblin Discord. If you're not there already, because you can be joining in on these conversations that are happening between book club streams and reading massive amounts of spoiler text. And this is especially applicable to people who are Brandon Sanderson fans, because occasionally the Brando Sando machine just takes over that entire channel for hours at a time, which I love because I hate dead channels. And Brando Sando chat will keep book club rolling for like days sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. But we also need to find a way to not let our stuff get lost. So I think we need to use hashtags more often, but we can talk about that in chat.
We can also be pinning things more than we are, I think. Let's see. What else to talk about? Oh, check out our podcast, which is Quid Pro Roll. That's it's a podcast all about wrestling, dragons, and being ridiculous in a high fantasy space. So if you enjoy comedy and high fantasy and tabletop RPGs, then check that out because it's a lot of fun. Marian frequently hosts our Friday re-listen chats. It's become a little bit more of a split effort recently as you've been busier, which I can respect.
Since I was going comatose for some reason at Fridays at 5 for months, it was nice to have a co-host. And this is my cat Mochi. Hi.
Mochi. Hi, Mochi.
You can also see pictures of him on the Discord quite often.
Yes, the Pets and Positivity channel is great for seeing pet pictures.
Yes.
And then I would say also check out our Goblins and Growlers website, which is just goblinsandgrowlers.com, because that's where we do all of our other stuff that we're involved in, like book production and creating one-page dungeons for our Patreon and making cool shirts for people and things like that. I believe, I don't know exactly when it's coming out, but Lauren, I've heard that you're cooking up a little something for our one-page dungeon Patreon folks.
Yes.
I don't know if you're ready to talk about that at all yet, which if you aren't, that's okay. But if you've got any little tidbits you'd like to leak out.
I need to get back to that writing project. But
so relatable.
I was going to say a feeling I think we all know too well.
Yes.
But some fun deadly tea party vibes.
Ooh. I'm even more excited now. I was excited before. Great. I'm even more excited now. All right. Excellent. Thank you, everyone who tuned in, for joining us and for chatting along and adding your thoughts. Thank you so much, Marian, for guest starring on this.
Thank you for having me. It's a blast.
Lauren, thank you for being our inimitable expert on stream, our book reader extraordinaire. And we will catch you all next month. What day did I say? The 29th? Yes.
The 29th.
Next month on the 29th. And in the meantime, get your copies of the 10,000 Doors of January from our conveniently located in Willow Lawn, Richmond, Virginia, Alpha Comics and Games. And we will see you in chat, and we will see you on the next stream. Thanks,
Bye,
y'all, and
everybody.
bye.
Bye, chat.